Teal on March 23rd, 2014 with Mrs. Felicita Arriaga. We are at St. John Fisher Catholic Church in Richmond, Texas. This project is entitled the Voting Rights Oral History Project, which is a part of the Voces Oral History Project. Thank you, Felicita, for taking the time to join us today.
You're welcome.
So we'll get started with some background information about growing up in Rosenberg. So we will start with your parents. Who were your mother and father, and how did they meet?
Pedro and Jesusa Munguia, and they met at a dance in a dance hall, old dance hall in Rosenberg. And from there, they didn't last too long. He says that I think within a month he took her and they got married.
Describe a typical day with your mother and father when you were growing up.
A typical day. My mom was always ironing for people and going out and cleaning houses. My dad worked for the city. He would come home at lunch. She would cook lunch for him every day. So we all got to eat at home at noon. And we would go outside to play during the day with the neighbors. We lived in the city of Rosenberg. And it's the typical day. We would go, my dad would take us every Friday. He would take us to a place in town called Prosodics TV store. And they had a TV on the window. And my dad would buy hot sausage for us at the corner, cut it up and give us each a sandwich and sit us in the car, and we'd watch the TV there because we didn't have a TV at home. So that was then going to bring us back home to go to sleep.
So did your parents talk about work at home very much?
Working at home?
Did they talk about work at home?
My dad would talk about his job, what happened that day, the problems or adventures they had that day in the city. He was a backhoe operator, so he got a lot of input from the things that happened at work. He had a man that had a cave-in one day, and he came home at noon, and he was all stressed out because he had dug him out with a backhoe, but he saved him. And we were all excited because he came to tell us that the man's brother got so scared that he ran around the neighborhood knocking on doors, telling people to get the ambulance over here. And in the meantime, he was digging him out. And he dug him out, and he lived.
Wow.
So I think it's like that.
Describe life as a Mexican-American child being raised in Rosenberg.
We attended Our Lady of Guadalupe Church at that time. We used to come here to St. John Fisher, but then we went to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And we would go to catechism over there. And then we started, of course, we were going to school, but we didn't know much about the politics or anything until I think I was probably about maybe 12 and 15 when my mom took me to go and vote. She went to go vote, and I asked to go with her. And she said, yes, they were going to vote for a man that my mom worked for, and she ironed for him and his wife. And he was running for something, school board, I think, or commissioners. But anyway, I went with her, and we went into the voting place in the city of Rosenberg. And when we went inside, they took her name. They were looking for her name. And her name was on the registered list because she had registered. But when they asked her to sign the ballot, she didn't know how to write. So she had never learned how to write her name. So they told her she couldn't vote because she couldn't write. And they sent us out. Me and her walked out. And my dad did get to vote because he knew how to sign, but my mom didn't. We walked out, and outside she told the man that was running, she said, I couldn't vote for you because they wouldn't let me vote. And they told me that because I didn't write. And he said, oh, Jessie, don't worry. If I lose by one vote, I'm going to go back and fight that vote. And I remember I told him, well, fight it now. But he didn't answer me. And I was a kid, so they didn't pay no attention to me. But I always remember that.
Was this man of Mexican American descent?
No.
No.
No. He was.
Go ahead, sorry.
In fact, he was. He even became a state representative. Was Joe Hubenak, and he was always real good with my mom and dad. And he asked them if they would go vote, and they said yes. So.
What else do you remember about that day? What were the voting facilities like at the time?
The voting, it was just a little table that they had there in the city of Rosenberg, the old city hall in Rosenberg downtown. And it was just, you'd walk in and there were 3 white ladies sitting on the table. And when she went to sign her name, and she said, I can't sign, I put an X on it. And they said, no, you have to sign your name. If not, you can't vote. So they didn't let her vote. And it just made me feel real bad, like we weren't as good as other people that were there voting. Like my mother wasn't as good. That's the way they were treating her. And when we went home, we talked about it, and my dad said, don't worry, Jessie. Next election, you're going to vote. And from that day, he started teaching her how to write her name. And next election, she got to go vote. And she voted, but she had to learn how to write her name. So.
At the time, were there many Mexican American people voting?
No, not very many. I would say when we went to vote that day, I would say maybe 2 or 3 people voting. There weren't that many Mexican American. A lot of people didn't know how to write, and a lot of people were afraid to go and vote. So they just didn't go. People didn't go. We couldn't get people elected for a long time. And from that day on, I started getting involved with the things that were going on. And I was able to, through Dora Olivo would help me. I would ask her a lot of things. And with her, when I got married and went to live in Little Mexico, we didn't have no streets. It was all mud. And we didn't have no lights. We didn't have anything out there. So she told me, she said, take up a petition. So I took up petitions to have our streets done, to get our lights on, and to get a park built out there. And then I had to petition to get the name Macario Garcia, named after Macario Garcia, because I knew my mom and dad had gone out and they had gone out to fight for him the day that they put him in jail because he had slapped the girl coming from the service. He had just gotten out of the army and stopped at the Richmond Drive-In and went in to ask for a cup of coffee. And the lady told him, no, you're Mexican, you can't drink coffee here. So he got mad and slapped her. And he went outside, and by the time he got outside, the police were there waiting for him, so they put him in jail. And they went through a lot. The whole city of Richmond was up in a big roar about it. And they got him out of jail. So from then on, every time that we needed something in Little Mexico, every time, that's the colonia where I live, and every time that we needed something, I would take up a petition to get different things done, or we'd go to the city council and ask the city council to do things for us. And a lot of times they'd ignore us, but we kept on until we got things done. So we have a real nice park now, and we have lights and we have streets. We just got a brand new street, big, nice street built in the colonia. So those were things that we did.
I definitely want to discuss that further, in particular your political involvement with the petitions and stuff. But let's go back to more of your youth, and tell me more about what you're calling your colonia in Little Mexico. Where was that in location to, or where was that located in relation to the rest of Rosenberg, the main area?
It's located about a mile out of the city of the town, and the street goes out of town and goes into a street, which is Bloomy Road, and that's the colonia. And they called it Little Mexico because it was almost everybody there was Mexican people living, and that's where we would go. There was a little baseball park at the end. We'd go play baseball over there sometimes, and the people knew it as Little Mexico. And then there were 2 more streets built, and I don't know for what reason, but for some reason they named the other streets Veracruz and Matamoros, which Matamoros is what I live on. But the first streets were Jefferson and Washington, the first ones. They were English, and then ours were Spanish. But it's called Little Mexico, and it's still there. It's still separate from everything. They've built new houses near there, but all the old houses are still there, and it's mostly old families that are still living there. And like we've lived there 47 years. Since we got married, we made our house there. We've been married 52 years. So.
Did you live out there when you were young too, before you got married?
Did we what?
Did you live out there before you got married too?
No, we lived in town. We lived in the city of Rosenberg. So my dad worked for the city, so we lived in the city right behind Rudy's store. That's where we used to live.
What do you think was the main reasoning for most of the Mexican American citizens to be moving out that direction?
I think there were a lot of people that would come from the valley. We had a lot of people that came in trucks for picking cotton and that, and I think that a lot of those people that's where they rented a house, and then they liked it, and they stayed. I'm not sure. That's what I've thought about all the time, is I know that there's a lot of people that have been there a long time, and now their kids and their grandkids are living there. So it's been a long time.
Back to the to voting and such. Did your parents go to vote every year in the election when you were young?
I don't remember them going to vote. That day that my mom went to vote and took me, that was the first time that I had ever seen them go to vote. And then that happened to her, and I thought she was going to give up, but she didn't. She kept going to vote from then on.
You mentioned that some of the Mexican American citizens were somewhat afraid or intimidated to go to the polls and vote. What do you think the main reasons for that?
I think there were a lot of people, because I know that my uncles and my aunts, oh no, what do you want to go vote for? Then they're going to have all your information, and they're going to be looking for you every time they're looking for somebody. So that's what I got from them.
Okay. During your adolescence, what was your vision for the future in regards to Mexican American rights? I know you said you got involved at an early age.
Well, that day that they didn't let my mom vote, I got real upset, and I started telling everybody. I said they wouldn't let mom vote, and Joe Hubenak knew, and he said that if he lost by 1 vote, then he would go and fight it. But I didn't see why he couldn't fight it right now, even if he didn't lose, and I think that that's wrong. So from then on, I said I'm going to start doing something to help people, to at least to educate the people as to what can be done and what are their rights. And from then on, I started getting involved. There were many times when I left my kids at home after my kids were born, and we'd go and pass out flyers and have meetings at different places, and to get the people to know that what their rights were. And even still like that, they wouldn't come out.
During that time when you were involved in the passing out flyers and such, were you part of a specific organization?
Well, the forbid voter registration. That's what we called it. It was something that Dora had gotten together, and us and Lupe Resti, we all were involved in that.
So in Rosenberg, were there certain occupations or roles that were expected to be filled as Mexican American citizens?
Yes. Um, whether it was expected, I don't know, but I know that the people mainly went to apply for jobs like construction, and the ladies would go clean houses and do ironing for people. I didn't see very many people working at offices or jobs like that. My dad used to clean a building. It's called the Tariki building, and he would clean it every night. And it was always white people all dressed up in suits working in those offices. That's what I used to see because I would go help him. So I didn't see people getting good jobs.
What do you remember thinking or feeling about the differences in the occupations that your father and his peers were working in versus the men in suits that you saw?
I don't think I ever really thought about it, that it was wrong. My dad worked for the city, my brother worked for the city, brother-in-law, my uncles, everybody worked for the city of Rosenberg. And I just thought that it was a good job for them because they got paid pretty good and they had insurance. But I didn't really think about it until I started getting up, going up higher and doing different things. And then we started questioning.
What is your earliest memory of your awareness of your place in the world in Rosenberg?
My what?
Your earliest memory of your awareness of your place in the world?
I think that day that I was 12, that they denied my mom, I think that day I kind of started realizing that we were Mexicans, and we weren't Mexicans, we were U.S. citizens. And one time I went to Taylor Ray High School, junior high, and I walked home with a friend of mine, and my friend was real dark complected, but she was Mexican. And we both walked into a drugstore there at the corner of downtown, and we walked in there, and I asked for an ice cream cone. I asked for an ice cream, and the man gave me an ice cream in a cup and looked at my friend and said, "Here's an ice cream cone." "Here," he said, "but you have to eat it outside." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because she's Mexican." I said, "I am too." And he said, "No, you're not." "Yes, I am." And I took the ice cream and I dumped it on the counter. I said, "I don't want it either." And I walked out. My friend walked out with me. But then I realized, that because we were Mexican, it seemed like we didn't belong with them. We didn't have the same rights as they did. And but from then on, I always fought for what I thought was right. And my dad, many times, he would tell me, "Don't say anything, don't say things, because they're going to get mad at me and they're going to fire me." And when I ran for city council, they told him, because I had put on there that my dad worked for the city of Rosenberg for 40 years. And he said that that his boss had told him that to tell me not to be using that in my campaign. So, that's when I realized that we were supposed to be different, but we weren't. So.
Going back to Rosenberg as a smaller community, what was it like growing up in a small town, and what were your relationships within the community like?
The relationship between the people, the neighbors that we knew, it was real family-like. Everybody knew each other. Somebody was sick or something, somebody was always there to help. And we stayed across the tracks. We lived north of town. There was a railroad track that divided the town and the Mexican people that lived toward the river. And that's where we lived. We lived on 5th, 6th, 7th, 1st Street, and to the other side of the tracks. And it was almost all of the people that lived there were Hispanic. But everybody stuck together when something happened. but don't ask them to go and vote because they didn't want to go vote.
Did you and your family travel outside of Rosenberg much, if at all, when you were young?
No. I remember one time we went to San Juan, Texas, because my sister had been real sick. My dad went to pay a promise over there that he had made to take her to visit the Virgin of San Juan. And that was the only time I remember going out of town with him.
How did that experience, if at all, change your perception of your life in Rosenberg?
It didn't change my life. I think it was better for us because we didn't go because we didn't have the money to go. But we were happy. We were happy. The family was together and we were happy.
What type of extracurricular activities did you enjoy in your youth?
Playing softball and just going to church and getting involved in church. I was one of the Catholic daughters, and we would help cook and help do things there at the church on Sundays, make tamales and enchiladas and all that we would do, and that was our extracurricular activities.
Did racial identity have anything to do with the types of extracurricular activities you participated in?
No, all of my kids would get together and play softball. There was a field right before you crossed the tracks in town, and the field was right there where we would all play baseball or softball. Kids would get together there in the evenings, and that was the only extracurricular. We lived right close to there.
So, growing up with the layout of the city that we've been discussing, were there parts of Rosenberg that you felt that you weren't as welcome in?
I always felt that we couldn't go to Travis Park or to Sunset Park because it seems like there was always white people there. And there were several times when we tried, my daughters, after I had my daughters, they would try to get a reservation for the park. And they didn't have any. They were already booked. And they were almost all the time booked by white people. You didn't see Hispanics get in the park unless it was Brazos Park. Brazos is across the tracks. So that was all we could rent out.
Were there any Mexican-American leaders within your community when you were young, even on a professional basis, if not holding?
The ones that I remember were Tony Becerra, John Arredondo, those are the two that I can remember.
What type
My
of
father-in-law, Pedro Arriaga, they would get teams together and take them out of town. Some of the kids take them out of town to play ball with other teams that they would book and things like that. But to getting involved like in the politics and that, I don't remember anybody.
What other type of leadership roles did they take on within your community?
Well, after I got married and Dora Olivo came into town, and Paul Cedillo and Mr. Arredondo, Mr. Becerra, then it started moving a little bit more into voting. Tony Becerra started running for council, and there were different people that were running, but they never won. They never won because people wouldn't get out to vote enough. And we would go out and knock on doors and everything. They just weren't getting out.
Okay, let's talk about a little bit more about church. So I know you guys regularly attended church, and what were your experiences at church like? What do you remember the most?
I remember the most the cooking, the tamales, and we'd make big old, they called them pailas, they were iron pots, and we'd make the tamales and put them in there, and the men would cook them outside, and it was real nice to see the men working with the ladies and doing everything together. and then we would sell them and as plates of food, and we would do that for our bazaars, different things that they wanted to make money for at church. So that was what I remember most.
Were the churches in Rosenberg segregated?
Yes, I would say so, because like Our Lady of Guadalupe is across the tracks, and there are no Hispanic churches on this other side of the tracks. Now they've started to come up some of the different religions, like Baptists and Pentecostals, and I think there's like 3 churches now that have come up that are Pentecostal and Baptist. But our Catholic church, there's only one in Rosenberg, Our Lady of Guadalupe, across the tracks.
Did your church offer any outside activities with a youth group or otherwise when you were younger?
The only ones that I can remember are the Catholic Daughters at that time. And it was just, to go to Mass and to help with the youth that were making their first communion, and selling little things, odd things that we would sell there at church. But there weren't any activities where we'd go out of town or anything like that, no.
How important has your belief system been in your life, and how did it influence the person that you are today?
How important is what?
Your belief system in your life?
Oh, I think that has been the most important to me, because I feel that you have to help people. And my dad always told me that if you help people, God helps you. And he would say, if you give 2 or 3 times, he's going to double it for you all the time. So you try to help people all the time, and that's what I've always done. And that's the way that I feel. Our Church of Guadalupe Church, we're always doing something to help somebody. And our priest, we just had this new priest come. He's been here with us 7 years, and he totally changed our church, because we had Basilian fathers. They were all white, and I'm not saying that they were bad, because Father Jamie is great, but we never had a Hispanic church and a Hispanic priest until it was like about maybe 10 years ago. And it was always white. We always had to, go with white people. But now we've got Father Flores. Father Flores has been great for our church. In fact, we're building a new church. Wow. And we just started. They knocked down our old church this past week, and they're starting to build a new one. So we got together and got money together, and we're building a new church.
That's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting, though, that you had not had Hispanic priest until in the last 10 years. Were there other white citizens that attended the Lady of Guadalupe Church?
No, it was almost everybody. Now we have a few white people, but mostly it's Hispanic people.
Were the white priests, were they local to Rosenberg, or were they coming in from out of town?
Mm-hmm. They would come in from out of town, but they would have a house there. When somebody comes there, they give them a place to stay. So they would have a house there.
How were your relationships with church members and leaders growing up?
How were my what?
Relationships with the church members and church leaders?
I had good relationships, still have good relationships with everybody. The only thing is that because I'm always helping everybody would come to me for everything. But it's good. It's good to feel that you're needed. And, they still come to me for different things.
So let's move on to education. Did you attend a segregated school?
Yes.
How did you get to school, and how far did you have to travel to get there?
We walked to school probably about 5 miles that we had to walk every day. And the school that I went to at first, we had a room that was all Hispanic people in it. And then we would go and eat lunch with everybody mixed, but to the teachings were all Hispanic. And I went up to Travis School. I was in the 6th grade there, and it was all segregated. It was Spanish, all Spanish in one room.
Were your teachers also Spanish?
No, they were white.
So they spoke English during classes?
Mm-hmm.
Did you and your peers speak English or Spanish among yourselves at school?
English. So we had a few that came from Mexico that didn't speak English. And it was hard because the teachers would not deal with them. You know, a lot of times they'd send them to the office because they'd get into arguments with them. And but they didn't, because they didn't know how to speak English.
Did you guys that could speak English try to help?
Yes, we did have, but even like that, they would get upset at us because they didn't know, and they were making them do the things. It was hard to see people that don't know the language, and you're trying to make them learn something that they don't understand. So it was just hard.
Did you see many of those students from Mexico advance through the grades, or did many of them decide to drop?
No, I had 4 friends that were in my class, and they were always fighting. They would even fight with a teacher at times. They didn't understand a lot, but those all went to prison. One of them got shot and killed, and the other ones went to prison. So it was hard for them, but that's what they wound up doing.
So did your teachers ever get frustrated if you, who were able to speak English, spoke Spanish? Did it make your teachers upset at all?
We couldn't speak Spanish at all. We weren't supposed to speak Spanish at all in school. We were punished if we speak Spanish.
How did that make you feel?
Well, at the time, we just thought it was part of life there. You know, that's what you had to deal with. So there were different instances where you would get upset, but what could you do? Because if you tried to fight them, it would just be trouble with your dad, and especially my dad. My dad was always scared because he worked for the city, and he was always scared that they would come back at him for something that we did at school.
Did you personally ever get in trouble at school?
One time I did. One time I got in trouble because the teacher, Mr. Scott, he got into a fight with 2 of the boys. And I mean, they were fighting, fist fighting. And finally they called the police on him and they arrested him. And I was upset because it was just because they didn't understand him. And they went to jail. Sometimes when everybody's doing it, when it's all happening, you feel like that's part of it, and that's part of what you have to do. And now I know better, but you know, now if my grandkids come and tell me something, I had one 7-year-old that came, it's been 2 years, that he came and told me that his teacher had choked him. And a teacher came in and caught her choking him. And she went and reported it, and nobody did nothing about it. So that night I was at their council meeting and told them about it. The teacher got fired, but you know, it was still something bad that my grandson went through and had to come home crying on the bus because nobody helped him out. And he had marks here on his throat. They finally took him to child advocacy, and they questioned him under cameras and everything and found out that he was telling the truth. But I just don't let it happen anymore.
What caused the teacher to take such erratic action?
Because she said that he wasn't listening to her, and he wasn't listening, and he was yelling, and that's why she took him, for him to understand. She took him by the throat, and that's what happened.
Wow. Let's get back to your school experience. How big was the school that you attended?
How big was the school where I was going to? Well, the school was very big. It had 3 stories at Taylor Ray. It had 3 stories, but it was only the first and second floor that had people in it. So that's where we were at. It wasn't a big class. And Travis School was not a big class either. We only had that one class that was all Hispanic, and that was it. I think a lot of the kids were still at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. They were going to school there, because my husband went to school there at Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Do you remember around how many students were in your classrooms, just roughly?
In each class, about 36.
It's a pretty big class.
Yeah.
So, do you have any point of reference to compare your classes with the classes that the white students were attending?
No, it just seemed like they wouldn't do as much for us as they did for the other classes. And sometimes the teacher would walk out and leave us in the room by ourselves for a long time. And we were supposed to be quiet and not, do anything till he came back. But there were times when he was gone for a long time. And that's when the boys would sometimes get into fights and arguments. And
So did you have any white friends growing up?
Yes, I had like 2 or 3 white friends that I would go to their houses sometimes in the evening. And I remember I used to visit this one girl that we would go walking to her house, and we'd stop by there and we'd sit down at her table and get a drink or something. But as soon as the clock hit like 3:30, and she would say, you gotta go, because my mom's coming. My mom's gonna come, so you gotta go. So I had to leave. I couldn't stay there with her.
So your mom didn't know that you were coming over?
No, she didn't know that I was coming over. So it was that's just the way it was.
Do you think she would have been upset had she found you there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure she would have. Yeah.
So you noted that you guys were all together during lunch and such. Did you interact with very many white kids during that time?
Most of the time, the Spanish kids would take their lunch, and we generally ate outside. I know that my husband says that he would take his tacos and eat under the porch, under the stairs of the school, and because he didn't want anybody to see him eating his tacos, and he would eat under there. I remember my mom used to make the sandwiches, but his mom would make him tacos.
Why did he feel self-conscious about eating tacos?
I don't know. He just said that he didn't like to eat tacos, and she said not there in front of the white people. But then he says that once they started knowing that he was taking tacos, they would come and want to change their sandwiches for a taco.
Okay. When you guys were at lunch, did you continue to speak English, or did you talk in Spanish with your peers?
No, we talked English. Like I said, we couldn't talk Spanish, because if they heard us talking Spanish, we'd get punished. So.
Were your teachers from Rosenberg?
No. I don't know where they were from. They were white, so I don't know if they lived here in Rosenberg. I know one that was from Sugar Land and one was from Missouri City. But I don't know all the others.
So a minute ago I had asked if you had gotten in trouble, and you said one time.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly did you get in trouble for, and how were you punished?
Because I yelled at him that the boys weren't not doing anything, they just couldn't understand. And Mr. Scott got mad at me. And it seemed like he always liked me, but from then on he didn't like me no more. But that's what I told him. I said, they don't understand. That's why they can't, they're yelling because they can't understand what you're writing up there. And of course they didn't understand the English that he was writing. So.
Were you punished at all for that?
No, I don't think I was. No, not that I remember.
Did you go home and tell your parents what happened?
Yes, I went home and told my dad, and my dad said, "You're gonna get into trouble. You're gonna get me fired." So that's what he was afraid of, getting fired, because he had a good job, better than anybody in town or any other people, because he was a supervisor. So he had a good job. He drove the tractor, and he had a good job. So he would always tell me that, don't say nothing. And it's, it's kind of sad when you have to live like that, to be scared of saying something. Or like my dad, that he was scared of us doing anything or saying anything because we were Mexicans. It's hard.
Do you remember any of your brothers or sisters getting in trouble for that sort of thing?
No, I don't remember. My brother would always get in trouble, but it was just for different things. I don't think he ever stood up for anything like that.
Did you attend school regularly? Were you
Yes.
absent very much?
Yes, I went to school every day.
When you were in school, what kind of dreams did you have? What did you want to do when you finished?
I always thought of being a nurse. I wanted to be a nurse, but didn't get there. I didn't get there because I met my husband. My husband was working at a grocery store where we went shopping at. And I met him, and then I started seeing him, and we got married very quick.
So how did you feel any certain way about going to school and while you were at school? Any certain emotions that you remember?
No. I don't remember anything.
Did your parents ever visit the school?
No.
Just because they didn't have any need to, or why do you think that was?
Well, my mom worked. My dad worked all day, and my mom worked cleaning houses, so she never had time. And we had a sister that was sick all the time. She was born sick, and she never had time.
Did you talk about school very much at home?
No, not really.
What did your parents tell you about your future, and what kind of expectations did they have for you?
I don't think we ever talked about that. I don't remember talking about what we were going to do or what we were going to be. I don't remember ever Mom and Dad talking to us about that.
Do you have any particular learning experiences from school that stand out?
Learning experience?
Mm-hmm.
No. No, I don't.
Okay. And you said you dropped out of school. At what age were you?
I think I was 14. I was 14. I got married when I was 15.
And that was when you were in the 8th grade, correct, that you dropped out?
Mm-hmm, in the 8th grade.
What made you drop out of school? What influenced that decision?
I just didn't think they were doing anything for me at school. And then I met my husband, and we got married. And we started having our kids, and I didn't go back until after my daughter was going to school, to high school. And that's when I told her we'd go back and get our GEDs. And we did, so.
And do you remember when that was?
It was I think it was in 98. Had to be because her son was born in 98. And that was a little bit before her son was born that she went, that we both went. And then when he became old enough to be in the 10th grade, in the 12th grade, or he was in the 10th grade when he quit, and she told him, let's go, because when me and her did our test, I passed it and she didn't. And she got very upset because I hadn't been to school in about 15 years. And she didn't pass it, and I did. So she didn't go back to school until her son quit school. And then she said, no, that's me and you go and we'll get it. And they both went and they got their GEDs. So.
What do you remember feeling when you finished that accomplishment?
When my what?
When you accomplished and finished your GED.
Oh, I was real happy. I came home and I was so happy. And of course I was able to tell all my kids. And I think that when I went and got my GED, I think that they felt that they could get theirs. And my daughters, from there on, my daughters graduated. And they just stayed in school and graduated. One of them was the drug counselor. She passed away, but when she was becoming a drug counselor, at that time she was going to college to get her GED and to get up higher. And she did it. She got her GED and she got her drug counselor's license, and of course everybody was real happy. And she got her firefighter certificate.
When you were young, did anyone, any of your family, any of your friends ever talk about college at all?
No. I never heard about college until we were already married, that I started hearing about college and being able to go to college, and then that's when my girls started.
Okay, let's move into talking about your work experiences. I know you said your first job was at Dairy Queen. How old were you when you began working?
When I what?
Began working?
I was 17 when I started working at the Dairy Queen. And I worked there for, I think, like a year. And then my husband didn't want me to work anymore, so I quit working. And then I went to work for the senior citizens. And I didn't want to work, I was volunteering. And then they asked me to work for them, so I worked for them. And I worked there for 6 years. And it was good. I was real happy to work with the seniors. And I was able to deal a lot with Spanish seniors because they spoke Spanish. And the people that we had working there as supervisors, they didn't speak Spanish. So I was able to deal with them more.
Do you remember when you started doing that with the senior citizens?
The senior citizens? Oh gosh, I don't remember when it was. It had to have been, it's after my kids were born. I would say maybe like in about 79. 77, I was born 65. I would say maybe around 79, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what year.
Let's go back to you and your husband. So tell me again, where and when did you meet?
We met at the grocery store where he worked and we shopped. And that's where I met him.
Do you remember, did he ask you out, or how
No.
did that happen?
No, he came and started talking to me, and I didn't want nothing to do with him. So all the girls talked about him, how he was like to go out with girls and all that, and I didn't want nothing to do with him. Until after about a year was when he asked me out, and I went out with him. And from then on, we got married after that, right after that.
What was your first date like?
It was okay. We went to, there was a place here called, it was called Lover's Lane, but it was right here at the state school. And they had pretty trees and stuff down there, and we'd just drive down there and sit and just talk. So that's where we went the first time.
How soon after that was it that you got married?
About, I would say maybe about a year.
Can you tell me a little bit about your marriage celebration?
Yeah, it was in my father-in-law's house, and it was just, I remember they took me to buy a dress at the Three Sisters store. I bought a dress, a white dress, and all of his family came to visit and to get to know me. And my family, there were very few that went, but his family, everybody was there, and because they had come to meet me, and we had cake, and they made food and everything. It was real nice. And then the next morning, we got up early in the morning and went to church, because we had gotten married, but they weren't giving communion. So we had to go back for communion in the morning. And we went back for communion. And then he went back to work. He was working. So.
Where was he working at the time? Was he still at the grocery store?
He was working at, by then he was working at a plumbing store, at Carruthers Plumbing.
So, and then you guys started having kids, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we had one every year, a year or 2 years, we had one. And we had our 6 kids. And it was the 2 girls, and then 3 boys, and then the last one was a girl. And the last one I got real sick, so they told me I couldn't have any more kids. In fact, my youngest daughter, the kids always call her a miracle, because I was pregnant from her when I developed a cyst in my ovary, and they had to do surgery. And when they did surgery on it, he told me that I'd probably lose her. And so they did surgery, they took my ovaries out, and they tied my tubes so I wouldn't have any more kids. And I said, what happens to the one that's in there? And he said, she's already in there. You're going to have her fine. And I did. She was born and she was fine. And up to now, she's fine. But, you don't hear people having kids after their tubes have been tied. But it was okay. She was the last one.
How do you compare your children's experiences during their youth with your own?
To what?
Your children's youth experiences with your own experiences growing up.
Well, I think they've had it a lot better, because I understand them. And whenever they needed help, or whenever something happened at school, I was there. I was there when my oldest was having problems at school, but they never called me and told me. And thank God for Dora Olivo that worked at Bowie School. And she was the one that came and told me, Miss Arriaga, she knocked on my door one day. And she said, Miss Arriaga, you need to go to school and see what's going on with your daughter, because your daughter doesn't need to be in the class she's in, and you need to tell them to test her. And I didn't even know what she was talking about. So she said, you go tomorrow down there and tell the principal that you want her to be tested. And they had her in a special ed school, a special ed class. And I went down there and I told them that I wanted her tested, because I didn't know why she was in that class. And they tested her, and she tested out of the class. And she went on to regular classes, and of course, she became a drug counselor, and she always got ahead in what she wanted to do. But that was some of the experiences, and I think about it. I thought about it afterward. How many kids do they have there that, the mothers don't go complain? And thank God for Miss Olivo that she told me, because I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known that was happening. So.
Did Miss Olivo work at the school?
Huh?
Did Miss Oliva work at this school?
She was a teacher.
Okay.
She was a teacher, and she didn't feel that my daughter should be in those classes.
Do you know why they put your daughter in that class to begin with?
I was told, and not by them there, but I was told that the reason they usually did that was because they had to have so many kids to get funded. So they would put just, any kids that were Spanish in there so they could get funded. I didn't have any proof of that, but that's what I was told. So, different things.
Were the schools still segregated when your children were going to school?
No, they weren't. They were already, everybody was together. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Had the community segregation changed much?
Not really. The only thing was at the schools, but the other things, no. In the town, in the city, especially the city, they were just bad about getting things to us, and we'd always have to be begging and petitioning, and I don't know. They called me an agitator. Because the councilman one time told me, she's just nothing but an agitator, coming and creating problems for us. But I said, an agitator, that's what the washing machine has, and it gets things clean. I remember I told him that one day. And I did, I would go and complain all the time about whatever. And I learned that if you went to complain, my dad said the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And that's what I would always do. And our addition, not because of me, because of all the people that I would call them, let's go to city council tonight, will you go with me, this and that, and they'd get together, and there we go. But because we didn't let them, just go over us. If there was money coming in, we want some of that money for our neighborhood. And that's the way you have to do it.
So how old were you when you started doing that type of thing?
I was probably about 20, 19 or 20. It was my husband. I guess he got finished.
So why was it important to you at that time to encourage the other citizens to vote?
Because I felt that if we could get them to vote, we could get some representation on the council. And that way we would get more things done for the neighborhoods. And we finally did. We finally got Lupe Reste elected on the council. And me and her had ran, and she won. I didn't win. I think I lost by about 12 votes. But we were pushing people to go vote at that time. And she was telling me a while ago that one of the things she has there where we went and signed up for the election for me and her to run. And the people came out of the woodwork to vote, but they came out to vote against us. So that's what happened. They came out and voted against us in the first election that we had like that. The second one, then we got the Spanish people to get out. But the first one, they came out they voted against us horribly.
When you went to sign up to run for office in the first place, did you meet any kind of backlash at that time?
No, they just threw us a paper there for us to sign up, and we wanted to sign up. Didn't seem like they were too happy, but I guess they knew that they were gonna come out and vote against us. And there was a certain group in town that were people from the businesses that were together, and it was always they would stick together. And sometimes they would tell us, "Oh, I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for you." When they went to vote, they weren't going to vote for you.
How did your first experiences affect how you proceeded?
I think it gave me more energy. And I've taught my kids to do that whenever they have any problems or, anything. Don't let them go. And if you think you're right, you go fight for it. And that's the way my kids are too. They're, you know, my son worked at the state school, and when he wanted to become an electrician, he went for it. And he tried it 3 times before he got his license, but he kept on. And you know, that's the way they get things done.
How old were you when you first went to vote?
I think I was 21, because at that time they didn't let us vote until we were 21. So I think it was that I was 21 the first time I voted. And I remember that my number, and it still is, my voting number is 663, I think, and my husband's is 664. They were the first numbers in that area to go and vote. We were some of the very first ones that went to go vote. So our numbers are the low numbers.
When you were old enough to vote and started voting, were there more Mexican American citizens at that time that were voting and going to the polls?
No, not really. You know, once in a while we would go and get people from the houses and take them to vote. If you would go get them and take them, they would go. But they weren't going to go by themselves. My brother, I ran 2 times, and my brother didn't go vote for me once. And I would tell him, and yeah, I'm going to go. Tony, did you go vote? Yeah, I already went. And then when I checked the rolls, he hadn't gone. But he was scared to go. He was scared to go vote. I don't know why, but he was scared to go vote.
Was there any sort of intimidations or anything at the polls that may have been scaring them off?
Not intimidation. It's just that when you get there and you're by yourself walking up there to the poll, and it's mostly all of them are white people, and they have their little tents right there where, you know, they're just there to get people to vote for them. But we didn't. If we went, we just stood there. But they would have tents and have everything set up out there in the distance of the voting, and it kind of, you know, intimidates you to see them. But it was our fault, because we should have gotten a tent and put it out there too. So.
Did you know specifically any people that were discriminating against you, either at the polls or within political parties or schools?
That I know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, some of the council people at that time didn't like the fact that us Hispanics were running. But they didn't really tell us anything to our faces. But we just know that they used to tell people, don't vote for her, this and this and that. And they did call me out loud in the city council room one time. They said that I was nothing but an agitator. And it was one of our well-known city councilmen.
Were you there at that time?
Yeah, I was there. And it's in one of those papers that I have, it's in there that the newspaper wrote it, that I was an agitator.
Did you respond during the meeting?
Because I was getting the petitions to get things done. Oh, and that was when I had filed the complaint with the Justice Department on the streets, the way they did the streets and how much they were charging on it, and charging us for interest and penalties and all that. And at that time, that's what they said, that I was just an agitator, and that's why I had filed a discrimination suit against them, and that it was not true. And they stated all kinds of things that were not true, that I had lied. And the Justice Department found them guilty. Everything that I said in there, they found them guilty. And I think that was one of the big problems, because when I started to file, I didn't know how to do all of that. I mean, I'd gone to school, but I didn't know how to sit down and write a proper letter to the government. But you stop and think, and you don't have to. Just write it in your own words, and that's it. Whether I misspelled something or I didn't put my sentences right or whatever, they got it, and they listened to it. So.
Do you remember what year it was that you made that complaint to the Justice Department?
I think it was in '79. I think that's what I wrote on I saw on the paper. Those papers have the dates. And those are the original papers that I got back from Washington, from the Justice Department, where they found him guilty.
How long did it take you to get a response back from them?
It took me about 3 months, and I got the response. And they came out. They told me they were coming out to investigate, and they came out to my house, and I got one of my neighbors to go with me, and we went out riding town, and I showed them all the streets that were dead-end streets, and they were, short streets. They were all 36 feet wide, and ours is 28.
What was your reaction? What do you remember feeling when you received their response?
I was real happy, and I was thinking that they were going to come and make them tear up the street and make them build it over, but they didn't. They said the only thing that they were going to do is take off the penalties and interest, and put there that I think it was for 10 years, they had to keep the street up to concrete standard, because they had not built it in concrete, and all the other streets in town were concrete, except ours was built with asphalt. So.
Can you give us a point of reference for the types of fees and how much they were that they were trying to charge you with the interest and stuff?
I don't remember how much interest. I've got all the paperwork in that thing, but anyway, it was, I know that on my lot is a 50 by 100 foot lot, and they had put in a driveway and the curb on the side of so that was what we were supposed to pay on. And my charges were $980 that I was going to have to pay. And then the more time I took, the more they were going to be adding to the interest. And of course, we got the streets that were asphalt, they weren't concrete. And we were having potholes all the time. So now they've kept up with them. They re-poured on there, because I would go, they told you had to do this, you have to keep it up like concrete. And they would come and fix it.
What, if any, sort of backlash did you receive from the community and the community leaders as a result of your complaint to the Justice Department?
Really, nothing. I felt like, because I was complaining, because they knew that if something was wrong, and I would go complain about it. I think it was a little bit better for us, and a little bit better for me. I would go somewhere, hey, Miss Arriaga, and I didn't receive too much. And my kids tell me, Mom, everywhere I go, they know you. You're Miss Arriaga's son. Yes.
So when was it that you first ran for an election?
I'm thinking it was I want to say that it was in 79.
And what exactly were you running for?
For council position too. Yep, and Lupe was running also for council. And then she ran one more time and got elected. And then she ran for mayor, and she got elected for mayor. I didn't run anymore, but she ran for mayor and for city council. And she was our mayor for 3-4 years. She was our mayor.
Did you see things change as far as the community and the segregation and such whenever she was in office?
The segregation changed a lot. There was a lot of change. They didn't have the signs, because they used to have signs in front of the doors of the doctor's offices and the places where we would eat. They would have a sign, no Mexicans or no coloreds. And that changed. But the things that didn't change were like, they took away like the Cold Theater had 3 sections, 3 stairs. One stair was outside the door. You'd go up the stairs, and that was for black people to sit in. The middle one, we would go inside the front door and go right up the stairs. That would Mexicans sit. The bottom was white people to sit. And I think these things like that, they changed everything. They took those signs off and everything. But the way people treated us, the way people talked to you, the way people the things they did around us, you know, there's still to this day, it really aggravates me to see where there's something going on in town. Their committees, almost all of the committees in the city of Rosenberg, they're all white people. And when they have something like that, like even if it's groundbreaking or something like that, it's all white people there in front for everything. And the fair people at the fair committee, I don't know this past year, but I know that almost all the time it's just white people.
When was it that things really started to change with them taking the signs down and that type of thing? Do you remember around what year that was?
I would say it was probably like around, maybe around like 1967. Yeah, around 1967, they started changing the school where, you know, they would have the kids all together in the rooms. Before they were separate.
Okay, let's see here. Overall, how did things change in Rosenberg after the Voting Rights Act extension and expansion in 1975?
Well, the changes were like that they would let us go in to vote. And it didn't matter if you didn't know how to sign your name, they would let you sign your name however you signed it, if it was an X. Also, they took down all the signs that said colored or Mexican, or they separated the buildings that had the stairs were Mexican and black and Hispanic. They separated them also. So just things like that you would notice. We'd go to a doctor's office and they would have 3 entrances, one stairs for the black people, one stairs for the Mexican people, and another stair for the white people. And they went into different rooms. And that about the drugstore where my friend and I went to get an ice cream, and I dumped the ice cream. I've never gone back in there. I've never gone back in there, and I feel like I don't want to be in there. You know, just that.
Did you know very much about the events going on nationally about civil rights?
No, I didn't know until the forbidden voter registration. And that was Dora Olivo that came and started that, the voter registration. And we started a little bitty office over there across the tracks, and we started registering people, getting out and walking the streets, and all of that we used to do. And a lot of times my kids were left at home by themselves.
You were pretty involved, it sounds like, in voter education and such. Were you involved at all with the Southwest Voter Registration Education Program?
Yes, I was. We had the meetings that we would have, even here in this building, we had meetings. And we would go everywhere to go do different things out of town, go register people, and educate them on, you know, how to go vote. We put mock elections, and we'd get out there and do all of that.
Do you think that your efforts have made a big difference?
I think so. I don't think we would have Hispanics in the city council, school board, and the county. We wouldn't have Hispanics. And we have Hispanics on all of those boards already.
Did you write one of the affidavits for the Barbara Jordan letter?
Yes. When they started the affidavit, I was here, and I think I wrote an affidavit when Paul and Dora were out there getting that done. I know that was at the time that I was having my kids, And but I do remember that my husband and I were there to write an affidavit. And I remember when Barbara Jordan came.
What all do you remember about those events?
The event, I just remember Dora putting us up there, and I remember that I stood up there on the stage and read something. I don't even remember what it was that I read, but I read something up on the stage. I was so nervous but I did read something. And there were a lot of people at that time. I think the voter registration and I always forget the other organization that came down that was with the churches. I think that helped out a lot out here.
So at
in the Southwest.
Actual Barbara Jordan meeting, where was that held?
I think it was here. I know we had one here, and I know we had one meeting that I went to in Stafford, but I think that one was here.
And what was the turnout like?
There was a lot of people. We had a lot of people. It seems like when Dora does something, it's the people come. The people come out because she's done so much for us. And they come out a lot of people.
Was the audience predominantly Hispanic?
Huh?
Was the audience predominantly Hispanic?
Yes, most Hispanic and Black.
Did you see many white people at all?
No white people except for some of the dignitaries that had been invited to come, and they did come, but it was very few.
So how did things unfold after or change after that meeting here?
Well, the only thing was that they put more people on their committees, and they were doing a little bit more for our neighborhoods. So, but they would invite us to their meetings and invite us to be on their committees.
Was there any sort of community reaction or backlash to those events?
No, not that I remember.
So how does Rosenberg today compare with the Rosenberg that you grew up in? And specifically, how did these events that we've been discussing affect or influence these changes?
Well, the things that I see that have changed are that we've gotten some city council on there, some people for city council. So that made a lot of difference for us and changes. And we've gotten people on committees. But really and actually, the laws and things that are still there, they're still there. You know, they're still there. When we ask for something, if we don't go and ask and bug them about it, it's hard to get anything. There's not going to be money that comes in, and unless it's dedicated for that, they're not going to give it to us. They're going to put it somewhere else, somewhere in the parks that they have. We have a park at Garcia Park, and that's the one that I had petitioned for, Macario Garcia. And we had money that was allocated for that about 4 or 5 years ago. They just put in some swings and things. But Sunset Park, they're always getting new stuff, everything, new things, even for the handicap and all that. And we don't have anything like that.
That really about wraps it up for my questions, but do you have anything else that you would like to add or discuss that we haven't covered yet? No, I think you pretty much covered everything. If I would start telling you all the stories, we'd be here 2 or 3 days. But the main things that happened, I think those are the main things that I remember that I went through. I know that other people went through more. So that's about all that I can remember. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really
Okay.
appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.